Hey, what's up everybody? It's Dan here at Launch Academy, here to bring you another episode of the HTML show. We're continuing to dive into our responsive resume, and we'll hopefully be finishing up the mobile view of this resume and starting to look at how we're going to adjust it using media queries in order to make the display look positive on a desktop or tablet display. But before we dive in, I first wanted to just call out something that happened in previous episode that I actually didn't notice until after we parted ways. And remember that we ran into a similar issue where essentially some of the CSS changes and HTML changes that we were making down here had an impact on elements that were higher up on the screen. And this can happen often as we're kind of refactoring and organizing our code base here. And notice one thing that happened here that we didn't observe in the previous episode, where we were trying to perfect this headline here for professional experience. We actually adversely affected the headlines in our previous sections. Notice we've got that weird and sort of awkward ellipse on the left, but a hard corner on the right. So we want to actually kind of revert those changes by making a more specific selector in the resume section. So this is something that we constantly have to do as web developers, is as our page grows, we need to adapt selections in CSS rules so that they're more targeted and specific. And thanks to the wonderful world of CSS3, we have the ability to do that quite easily through both class-based, ID-based selectors, but also through the nesting relationship as well. So let's use the nesting relationship here to bring our tags, or I believe these are H4 tags, back to the way that they were intended to be. So we're going to pull this up in Atom. Bring this up here. And remember that we had programmed this H4 for experience, but we also have another H4 here that seems to be sort of adversely affected based on those changes. So we're going to go to our style and just observe what happened here. So we've got H4 and then H4.experience. And essentially what we need to do is we need to make these H4s a little less general and more specific. So we're just going to move all of these rules actually into H4.experience, specific to the CSS selection that we have on the lowest part of our screen. So let's save that. And now our H4s in the resume section are back to normal. So I used a more specific selector to isolate the specific experience class here so that we get this ellipse effect for professional experience, but in a way that doesn't adversely affect our programming skills header and our methodologies header. The other thing that I noticed when I was kind of observing how the session went, I noticed that there was a significant color difference between our progress bar and our dot-based indicators. So I'm going to actually go ahead and make these consistent with the colors that I've used on top. And I think that that will achieve a better aesthetic. So I'm going to take the gold color and update that in our progress bar. And in our dots. Oh, I got bitten by that whole register issue again, so I need to copy and paste again. Here we go, paste over that, and then I'm going to use the same aqua color. So we get consistency across those two displays. So that looks a little more consistent, bolder, and in line with the section above it. So those are pretty positive aesthetic changes there. All right, so let's dive into some of the new material and start to work through our professional experience. Now, notice here that in the employment section, basically what they have is 3 different treatments of text, where they have the sort of title or the company name of the place where this individual is employed, what their title was, and how long they were there. And it's all kind of munged together. I think what I would like to happen responsively is I'm going to actually put the dates by which I was present at that job. I'm going to put that above the actual company name. And that's kind of consistent with some of the things that we have in this sample resume, where we've got the company name, the location, as well as the title and the duration. So we're going to add all of those components, and we're going to take a little bit of a deviation from what this theme has done for us. So again, I'm going to focus first on getting the markup in a place where I'm happy with it, and then we're going to actually take that markup and stylize it. So I'm going to take the text from our professional experience here and just copy and paste it into our HTML document. And I'm going to give a little bit of thought in terms of how I'm going to structure this professional experience section. I'm going to create a section tag for each employment option here. I might decide to use a div just because it kind of disambiguates between the employment section and a div that represents each individual piece of work experience. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Professional experience. We're going to put this inside the resume detail. We're going to say div class equals professional experience. And here I would probably want to use an H5. Again, we're trying to represent an outline of all of our experience and all of our detail here. So I'm going to use an H5 to represent that this company is sort of the 5th level header of my professional experience and my representation of my job skills. So I'm going to do that. Cool engineering. And I may decide that I want to make my title the H6. And I'm going to make the duration by which I was present in that title, I'm just going to make that a P tag. It's kind of extraneous information, not necessarily as relevant as the title in the company that I went to work for. So this is April 2013. We're just going to do 2013 to 2015. And we may decide to also do the location. We'll say that this was in San Francisco. All right, and then we're going to bullet out our accomplishments. And one thing that we're very big about in in career services and the education that we do here is telling folks to talk about results and focus on the results that you delivered when you were present in the company and in the role that you were put in. So notice that all of these bullets are sort of results oriented. And that's what we would advise you as a student to do in your resume as well. So oftentimes when we're copy and pasting, we've got to kind of get rid of some of the text cruft. And that's what we're doing here. And then we're going to make these and because these are getting a little long, we're going to introduce some hard returns. Oops. All right, we're rearranging all these into list items. Notice how I'm using hotkeys to really help me move along here and process this text as quickly as possible. As a developer, your most important commodity is the time that you spend doing things like this. So you always want to be mindful and thoughtful about how you can save time. And using hotkeys rather than reaching for the mouse is one way of wonderfully kind of evolving and growing as a developer. So though it may cost you a little bit of time up front, learning the hotkeys is going to help you become a better developer in the long run. So take that time, work through that. My last bullet here. And we come across a special character here. Because we're using UTF-8 encoding, we could acceptably have that and in there. But if we're being good practicing developers, we're going to use an escape character here to represent that R and D, that ampersand that is represented in this bullet point here. And we could do the same for percentages and dollar signs. But the ampersand tends to be the one that is by far the most kind of tricky character, elusive character in the HTML markup language. So I always try to escape those. And the editor does a good job of kind of giving me that hint that I want to escape that ampersand. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, so when we pull this up, it should look rather ugly. And of course it does. So we want to bring this text to kind of be similar to what the text representation that we have here. So now that we have our markup in place, now what we need to do is kind of stylize this and make it look pretty. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And in order to do that, I think what we need to do is specify special paragraphs inside this professional experience. And there we go. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to address this this duration. And it looks like it's kind of bolded, but it's kind of grayed out. So we'll do font weight bold, but we'll make it a subtler gray, maybe like a 3 there. And we're going to want to set the margin bottom to a lot more subtle of a margin. That's the location. We want to do something similar for the duration. So we see how the location and the duration now are coupled in terms of aesthetics. And we're getting sort of a lot of white space in between those. And it looks like because of a margin top based on what Chrome Inspector is showing us. So we're going to set the margin top. Well, we can change this whole rule like so. Those come up a little bit. We're going to change the font size to be a little smaller. That's not bad. All right, so we'll stick with that for right now and continue to kind of get the header, which is the collection of the duration, location, the company name, and the title. So we're just gonna kind of try to get all of that in a similar contextual aesthetic with what we have here. So we've got a H5, but I'm gonna actually be specific here and isolate this H5 to the professional experience div. And again, I'm going to tighten up the margin. So one thing I like to try to do is kind of get the white space situated in a way that's reasonable, and then start thinking about the coloring and the aesthetic treatment. So right now I'm just trying to bring the sort of the white space, the space between elements, up to date with sort of what's reflected in this theme. And we've got to address the H5, the H6. Let's see how all that looks. Now that's all kind of munged together, which is all good. We want the 2013, 2015 in the location here to have less visual weight or visual priority than the company name and the title. So when we talk about visual weight, we talk about the amount of real estate that it occupies on the screen, but also how the coloring is in contrast to its background. So if we can reduce the contrast between the location and duration paragraph tags in the background, we'll basically give it a lower visual weight. So we're going to go ahead and change this color to something maybe a little more subtle. We could try, that's not super great. We can kind of reflect on what we've done previously. An 8, yeah, I like that. Let's go with that. What I'm trying to do with my colors is kind of be consistent across the whole document as well. Something that's kind of increasingly important. And I'm going to actually set for the duration, I'm going to set a margin to 0. And see how that looks. So I'm trying to reduce the white space between the duration and the location here. And that looks pretty all right. So we should probably adjust the locations margin top and the durations margin bottom to get those a little bit closer together. So I could use the importance selector here, but when you're using the importance selector, which basically gives these rules more priority, I try to think of how I can actually do that through CSS. So I'm going to actually just move these further down the CSS document here, and that's going to actually give it priority. So see how the location and the duration kind of moved closer together? So mission accomplished. Awesome. All right, so that's looking a little better. I think I'm going to increase the font size of the company name. No, that's a little too much. That's not bad. I think I'll go with that. And I'm going to reduce the margin on the bottom here to bring the title up closer. So I'm only going to make that the bottom margin. Let's see how that goes. And there we go. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that headline. We could put the duration and the location to the right of the company name, but you know what? I kind of like this aesthetic better. And on a mobile device, for me, I like reading from the top down as opposed to left and right. So I'm gonna go ahead and just leave that the way it is. To provide some visual difference between the company name and the title, I may, for example, want to set the font style here to italic. I like that. And maybe just to add a little bit more pop to the color here. Let's see what it looks like if we add a little gold. And this is just an experiment. I kind of like that. Yeah, I think I'm gonna keep it that way. So you see how I kind of just worked in really small increments, focused on the white space and getting the white space right first, and then progressively adding coloring and font styling and things like that along the way. I think I'm going to also set the font weight to normal here. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I think I'm going to change the font size to be a little bit larger than what it is. And I'm feeling pretty good about that. So I'm about done with the header there. So now let's focus on making this unordered list a little bit better. Before we do that, actually, it looks like we want to add sort of an aesthetic caret to the right, and we'll use fontawesome for that as well. I think it's just a chevron, chevron right. So we call those little brackets a chevron. So let me show you that. So that's the icon that we're going to use. So the question is, where do we put that chevron? And I think what we're going to have to do we'll make get this looking similar, and I think we're gonna have to put this in its own div. We can look at the fontawesome documentation to see if there is some example code that gets us sort of that justified look that we're going for. See here how we can use it as list icons. That's not bad. I'm not really interested in doing it that way. So I'm just looking in the documentation here to see if there's something that can help us accomplish this aesthetic that we're going for. So see here, this is providing a fixed width. So we'll set the fixed width. And see how that affects the aesthetic. So see here, this icon is now breaking because of the p tag that we have. So I can either put all of this markup in its own section, or I can change the display behavior of this I tag to be an inline block. I still think we're going to have to put all of this in a container. So let's see how this pans out. So I'm going to use Chrome Inspector just to experiment a little bit and see if I can accomplish what I'm going for. I think I still have to make all of this an inline block, yeah. So what we're going to have to do is create a container div for all of the details of the professional experience. And then I'm going to have to change the display behavior of this container and the I tag that we just created. Sorry, this container and the I tag that we just created here. Okay, so we're going to say professional experience the I tag and professional experience for the experience detail. We're going to make these inline blocks. Let's see how that causes these to function. I've got a typo here. Lots of typos here, apparently. So let's just make sure that that inline block is being applied to these sections. Good. Okay, so now if I set the width of my I tag, hopefully everything starts to pan out. I'm going to get rid of that fixed width directive. Let's see if that helps things along. Let's find out. Okay, so that moved it over left, which is definitely what I wanted. But I want essentially my listing to almost be indented based on this chevron right. And we're not getting that behavior. Wow, I am spelling professional just completely wrong. Don't mind me. I can type. I promise you. So it looks like this div also needs to have an expressed width. All right, making some headway. Interestingly, I did not expect that caret to go all the way to the bottom. So we want to set vertical align here to top. And we get a little bit better behavior. And then we set the width of the eye. We probably have to consider padding and margin here. And there we go. So you see how iteratively I tried different things. I tried the fixed width directive supplied to me by fontawesome. I tried just setting inline blocks and setting a 1% width, which is a pretty frequent hack that we'll use to basically trick something into kind of not breaking in the way that we are trying to achieve this aesthetic here. But what ultimately worked is setting a static width for both the eye and for the div itself. And that's why we're getting this wonderful behavior that we have. But now we've got to get this to line up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set some margin on this eye tag to, let's start with 0.4 REMs and see how this works out. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. We want to put this on a sort of a round background, so we're going to do an FA circle. Fontawesome is just great for this kind of stuff. And we want to set the color there to be white. And the background color, we'll continue to use that gold color. See how that affects things. All right, so we want to set the on class So this is the flag on FA circle. So I'm just following along with this documentation here. Oh, interesting. These are stacked on one another. I thought this was a special class. So I'm literally just gonna take some of this work here and make some adjustments to our markup here. So now I'm gonna have to change from the I tag that I use in my CSS selector to consider this span pattern that fontawesome is recommending here. So essentially what we're doing is we're stacking a chevron right on top of a circle using fontawesome. So this is going to look ugly. We're going to work on it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to update all of these, and we're going to actually call out a special class on this span. We'll call it bullet. And we're already looking better than we were. And what we want to do is we want to eliminate that background color and set the color of the circle to be gold and then the chevron right to be white. So span.bullet, FA circle, we want that to be gold. Stay gold, pony boy, stay gold. Chevron right to be white. Oh, got to use the class-based selector here. And there we go. So a little more headway. And what we've got to do is see how this margin can be better. Good. And notice how the chevron right itself looks a little off kilter. So we're going to make sure that we set the text align to center. That still looks a little wonky. So we'll set, let's see what rules are getting applied here. Again, using the Chrome inspector. See here it's using a position absolute and it's trying to center it in the available real estate. So that looks okay. I guess that's centered. For some reason it looks a little off for me. So I'm just gonna cheat it a little bit. And I'm just gonna add a little margin. That looks a little more centered to me. That certainly looks better. Awesome. Now let's compare this aesthetic with what we have here. And notice that this bullet is a little more subservient to the higher order headline. So I want to make this smaller. So I'm going to get rid of the, we can make the font size a little bit smaller. See how that works. 0.6 rem. Let's see what that looks like. That's better, and now I can get rid of that margin left. or just make it a little more subtle. There we go. So that's looking great. So I've got my chevron appropriately sort of gridified. Everything is looking really good from an alignment standpoint. Now I want to treat these bullets a little bit better. And I think the number one thing is I want them to be aligned with the company and the title. And I want to make the font size a little bit smaller. So remember that every browser has its own version of a user agent style sheet. And that's what's causing this, this padding or this margin to occur. Well, both this margin and padding. So we're going to eliminate that by setting experience detail, or just professional experience. And we'll set the unordered list, and we'll say margin 0 and padding 0. Let's see what that looks like. That's not ideal. We want the bullets themselves to actually line up with the title. So we can actually say, I believe it's list style position, and we want that to be on the inside. Let's see what that looks like. Ooh, that's brutal. I don't want that. I want it outside. And then I want to set my margin left to 0.3 rem. Let's see how that works. Let's keep pushing that margin in a little tighter. And what we can do is we can actually inspect the element and play with the margin here. Just continue to kind of play with this until we get it to a place that we're happy with. I think we're going to want like a 1.0 rem. Yep, perfect. Margin left 1.0. Affect that change on the style sheet. And there we go. Now I want to make the font size a little bit smaller. That's a little too tiny. So we bump that up to 0.7. That's too big. It's kind of like a Goldilocks thing. You got to find the size that's just right. So I'm pretty happy with that professional experience bullet. So we're looking pretty good. And essentially what we're going to do is we're just going to duplicate that pattern and create some slants on that to reflect education. And I'm going to do that quickly just to round us out so that we can be focused on changing our mobile first design to accommodate desktop displays in the next episode. All right, so I'm going to follow this pattern of copying over a lot of this material here. So we've got the resume component, the resume detail, and then the experience. So I'm just going to copy this. And do we have a date component? Yeah, we've got all of that kind of stuff going on. So I'm just actually going to just create a clone of this div and populate it a little differently. I believe that's where I started. Yeah, the section tag, right? Good. And if I'm not sure how to line this up, Adam has this really neat feature where I can collapse and kind of understand where that section tag ends, assuming I have compliant markup or valid markup. So I'm just taking this and duplicating it. And I'm going to eliminate this unordered list for right now. And I'm gonna adjust this to be education oriented. So we'll take the information from the sample resume here, Launch Academy Online. All right. So we've got the markup at a really good place and in a way that is consistent with the experience that we previously coded. Let's see what this looks like. So it's pretty great, actually. We're in pretty good shape. But what we want to do is we want to change the color of our chevrons here to reflect that this is a different section. So if you recall, we had in the theme a green color for education rather than the blue in the employment. So we want to have the same idea here, and we'll use the aqua. But what I'd like to do is essentially utilize the power of CSS to accomplish this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the section here to education. And this CSS selector, this class, is going to give me the hook that I need to change the color of both this kind of icon and the chevron right that we just coded. So let's see how we can use that to our advantage. So see where we set the bullet circle here, and see where we set the span color or the I tag here. We're going to want to basically say that if I am in a section that is education, I'm going to set the background color to be that aqua color. And I'm going to do the same. Notice how I'm being intentional about where I'm adding that selection. So let's see if that accomplishes the aesthetic that we're going for the education section. Great, awesome. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing. Make sure I have that color on my clipboard. Going to do the same thing for where we talk about that chevron right in that FA circle. So I'm going to say dot education span dot bullet dot FA circle. And I'm using the power of a more specific selector here to basically override the default coloring. And there we are. So we've rounded out all of the sections of our resume. So in next week's episode, we're going to focus on kind of expanding the viewport here and starting to look at the desktop experience for our application. So we're going to have to start to think about media queries and breakpoints and start making this look better on a wider browser. And in fact, I bet you it looks quite ugly at the moment in a desktop display. And we're going to utilize the power of media queries to make this a much better experience. We'll see you then. In the meantime, keep coding, and I hope to see you in the Slack channel. See you next time.